Hi all, John at BauhausPerformance. Today we're going to go over trail braking and how to master corner entry. So let's start with what trail braking actually is. We've talked about it in some other videos, but we want to take the time to actually go over it in its own dedicated video since it's so important. So trail braking is continuing to brake as you begin to turn the car into the corner. Instead of releasing the brakes before turn in, like you would as a beginner, you would brake in a straight line, release the pedal, and then start your turn. With trail braking, what you're going to do is actually reduce your braking pressure, but not completely lift off the pedal. All right, so you're going to carry a little bit of brake pressure into the corner itself to maximize the grip of the tires. So it doesn't mean that you can brake later, although in some cases you can because you do have more braking capacity if you're extending the braking zone. But it is more about control and rotating the vehicle so that you get the most bite on those front tires and are maximizing what those tires are actually able to do. So let's talk about why we use trail braking. The number one thing is it helps the car rotate into the corner. So, you wouldn't necessarily use it for a long roller corner, but you would use it for a tight 180 degree corner where you really need the car to rotate, rotate that rear end in order to get around the turn as fast as possible. By using trail braking, you're going to keep more grip in the front, hence less grip in the rear. Rear is going to rotate, and you are going to achieve a stronger front end, giving you some better turn in. That's going to allow you to carry more speed in the turn in while still staying in control. You are going to need to control the rear end to make sure it's not, getting too out of control where you're not able to actually direct the car into the corner and you end up in an oversteer position. But once you kind of dial in how much trail braking you can use without, overloading those front tires and, not having enough grip on the rears, you're going to be able to carry a lot more speed into the corner while still staying in control. And then it also gives you more flexibility in your corner entry. It doesn't mean that you need to trail brake for every single corner, but it does give you the ability to try out corners. It's a different style of driving. So you can try it out on the corner, see if your time improves, or if not, you could still use your threshold braking or use some other techniques on that corner to see what's going to be the best for you, where you can stay in control and also maximize your speed through the corner. All right, so how do we achieve this? The first thing, we're going to, just like threshold braking, we're going to brake in a nice straight line. Straight line doesn't necessarily mean parallel to the racing surface. You can, have it at an angle if you want to get up on the curbs or something like that. But more or less in a straight line. During that time of the corner, what you're going to be focusing on is reducing the speed as much as possible. When you start to turn in, or actually prior to turn in, what you're going to want to do is release some of the brake pressure in conjunction with your turn in. Okay, so as you're turning in, you're relieving some of that brake pressure so that your tires, your front tires, are still maximizing their grip potential. It's just being directed from a decelerated position to now a lateral position while you're turning in. You're going to feel the front grip pulling the car into the corner. When we talk about pedal steering, this is what we're referring to is the actual brake. The brake input that you're giving is directing the car into the corner as much as the actual turning of the wheel is. Okay, so it's going to start to feel, you could, not like it's on rails, right? But you're going to feel that the car is going to actually, it's that rotation of the car angling itself into the corner more so than the input that you're actually giving it. So as you approach the apex, what you're going to want to do is relieve that pressure, that brake pressure, fully. And this should be in conjunction with your steering angle. So as your steering angle increases, on the apex you're going to have your highest steering angle. What you're going to want to do is that's also the time where you're going to have zero brake pressure, and it should be linear. So as much as you're turning in, you're going to be relieving the brake pressure. And it's going to be a little bit of a feel, right? But that's what you want to do. You don't want to carry, a 25% brake pressure through all of your inputs. And then once you reach the apex, you just release the brake pedal, right? Because what you're doing is you're leaving grip on the tires that's unutilized, and you're going to be much more prone to a lockup position if you're over exceeding the grip. You apply too much steering input and you have that constant 25% brake pressure. There's a good potential that you're going to lock that inside tire, and then you just lost that tire from a grip perspective and are going to have to regain that to regain control of the corner. After the apex, what you're going to want to do, same idea, just the inverse, is, as you're rolling out your steering input, you're going to want to roll on that throttle, power out of the corner. Simple as that. So that's the step-by-step on how you actually trail brake. It's simple in theory, but it does take some time to work on actually implementing it in practice. So as we talked about previously, let's go over where to use trail braking. Tight corners that really need a lot of rotation is where you're going to want to use trail braking, right? So you got a tight 180, maybe it's a street track, although, for us, it's probably, not going to be a street track, but say a really tight, 90-degree corner, not a lot of grip out there. What you need to do is use trail braking there to achieve some more rotation, right? But in the case of a corner, maybe it's a long sweeper corner, it's kind of a nothing corner. You wouldn't want to use trail braking there because you're just going to be adding more, wear and tear on your brakes for really no reason when you could just lift and achieve the same effect. And you're actually going to be faster that way. So that's going to be one place where you want to use it. With that, you can still use it on a 90 degree corner. And that can be helpful as well. You just need to feel it out, see what the timetable tells you, and go from there. Hairpins and definitely decreasing radius turns, it'll be helpful in conjunction with the late apex. That can be really helpful to help get the car to rotate in decreasing radius turns. So those are going to be turns where the turn actually gets sharper throughout the corner. And then also corners where exit speed isn't a priority. So it's turn one into a chicane or something like that. Definitely using some trail braking there can be really helpful. And as we discussed, not ideal for sweepers or some early apex corners. There's just no reason. There's really no reason to do it because you want to maximize your speed really into the apex for those. And if the speed is so high where it really doesn't warrant actually using the brakes, then it's not an effective corner to use trail braking. All right, let's cover some common mistakes when it comes to implementing trail braking. For you guys, it's typically going to be, the first couple times that you try to implement trail braking, you could run into these. So take your time. It's not a race to see who can figure out trail braking. It's a race to see who can implement trail braking effectively, right? So just take your time. So there are some common mistakes, and I'll talk about how you can rectify those. So the first one that I want to cover is braking too hard while turning. We kind of talked about this. If you have that constant, brake pressure and turning, it's going to lead to understeer position typically, or a lockup. You start to brake too much and you're rotating the wheel, and the front tires are unable to, account for the inputs that you're giving it, right? You're decelerating too much and you've given too much steering input. So you're going to end up going past the corner, past the apex, as opposed to directly to it. It can also cause snap oversteer, especially if there's not enough weight on that rear to really keep it stable. It can lead to some instability. So just keep that in mind. You want to really start slow with that, right? Kind of migrate from a threshold braking perspective to a trail braking perspective. Don't just try to implement trail braking right out of the jump. Another common one is releasing the brakes too fast. So again, you want to really be smooth with your inputs because you're going to unsettle the car if you start removing the brakes super quickly, or even, going from a high braking position, you're at your 80% 80% braking position, managing not locking up in the braking zone, and then you go to corner entry. You don't just want to lift and immediately jump off right down to a 10% position, because that's going to unsettle the car. All the weight's going to go to the rear, and it's just going to ruin your lap time or leave time on the table. And you'll feel it in the car. The car will start to bounce around, and you'll just want to make sure that you're not being really have finesse with your inputs. Don't be abrupt and sharp with your inputs, especially on the brakes. Another one, and it's actually one that I've struggled with, is trail braking too deep. So you're actually braking past the kind of ideal apex and actually transitioning into a late apex without kind of realizing it. And you're getting on the throttle too late because of that. So really keep in mind, a track walk can be really helpful for this, to make sure that you're, really hitting the apex that you're looking for. Use it in conjunction with your data to see where you're actually getting on throttle as opposed to what you think you are. For me, I really had to retrain myself, because when I was looking at the telemetry, what I was seeing was I thought that I was doing a nice mathematical line, but what ended up happening was I was getting on the throttle too late and carrying too much brake pressure essentially after the apex, and was causing it to be really a late apex corner for almost every corner that I was trail braking. So just keep that in mind. What you can do for this is kind of, if you don't have data available, just potentially assume that it's happening. See what it looks like on your times to back your throttle up, closer to where to the point where you think it's before the apex, because you might not actually be getting on throttle at the actual apex. And then the last one, overusing it in corners that don't need it. Early apex corners, fast rollers, some, high, 20-degree corners, 30-degree corners, 45-degree corners. You just don't need it. What you really need to be focusing on is, using threshold braking there, and, seeing what the timesheet tells you, right? That's going to be the most important thing. Is you want to use the technique that's going to be the most effective for your lap time, while also, minimizing your tire degradation, right? So see what the timesheet says, and see what it says over the lap if you are implementing, or over the session if you are implementing it for specific corners and things like that. All right, let's go over how to learn trail braking safely. So first thing, start to practice at 0.6 of a pace, or basically at a slower pace than your flat out qualifying style lap, right? You want to kind of slow down, feel things out, and just kind of get the muscle memory down when it comes to trail braking first, before you try to implement it on your qualifying type laps. Focus on releasing the brake and the timing of it, not just when you're starting, right? So the most important thing with trail braking is not actually, the lifting when you're going from, your braking zone to your corner entry. It's really more towards the apex itself, in that kind of turn-in part of the corner, kind of on the later end. So really focus on that. A lot of people will just focus on, releasing the brake after they come out of the braking zone. So really just focus on that as well. Experiment with how the car feels. Experiment with how the rotation feels using different pressures. I'm not talking about tire pressures here. I'm talking about brake pressures, right? So, again, focus really, it's going to be helpful to work on this at a slower pace and build up to your competition pace, rather than the other way around. So really, start slow, feel how the rotation feels. If it becomes too much, you might want to lean more towards a threshold with a little bit of trail braking, as opposed to full blown, really aggressive trail braking. And then you'll definitely want to use, your data, your video to check your consistency. Make sure it's actually working for you from a timing perspective. That's critical. Because if it's not working for you on a timing perspective, then it's really not worth it, right? All right, final thoughts. Trail braking is really important, right? So you want to make sure that you have all the tools available, and trail braking is a great skill to have, where you can implement it out on a lot of different tracks, obviously, a lot of different corners, and gives you another tool in your tool belt. So definitely, give it a shot and see how it goes for you. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you did find this video helpful, we appreciate it if you do like and subscribe. If you want to reach out to us directly, we do have our contact information down below. That's our Instagram handle and our email. And with that, we'll see you in the next one. All right. Thanks, y'all.